The cheer world is no stranger to scandals, but some names seem to slip through the cracks, protected by silence, connections, or bureaucracy. Brandon Hale was one of the most in-demand choreographers in competitive cheerleading. He helped craft routines for Top Gun, California All-Stars, Cheer Athletics, TVCC, Twist and Shout, Ace, and more. But behind the high-flying stunts and sequined uniforms, a disturbing story unraveled. A story of alleged grooming, abuse, institutional failure, and a justice system that hasn't fully responded. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the rise and the shocking allegations that led to the fall of Brandon Hale and his business partner, Taji Davis. This is the story they don't want you to hear. Brandon Hale's choreography wasn't just good, it was gold medal good. Over the years, he and his partner Taji Davis became fixtures in the all-star cheer scene, contracted by powerhouse gyms like Ice, Twist and Shout, Prodigy, Ace, and even TVCC, a team featured on Netflix's Cheer series. Together, the pair ran Show Pro Choreography, which eventually became Showtime Productions. They were more than just creatives. They were also an officially recognized vendor by USASF, giving them regular access to young athletes at camps, clinics, and competitions. And that access was abused. For anyone who doesn't know, USASF is the main governing body for all-star cheerleading in the United States. In 2014, a 15-year-old cheerleader, which we now will refer to as John Doe, met Brandon Hale and Taji Davis when they provided choreography services for his gym in Avondale, Ohio. During this initial encounter, Hale and Davis accompanied John Doe and other minor athletes to a day trip to Cedar Point Amusement Park. Doe would encounter them again after transferring to a new gym in Brecksville, Ohio the following year, another location that would contract the pair. Doe alleges that by the beginning of 2016, they began privately messaging him via a mobile app. On July 28th of that year, Hale and Davis returned to Ohio to provide training and choreography services to Doe's former gym in Avondale and began to exchange messages once again. They allegedly pressed him to visit their hotel room in Westlake, Ohio. John Doe initially refused, but ultimately went to that room. When he arrived, he learned that Hale and Davis would also be providing services for his current gym during their stay in Ohio. Once inside the hotel room, the situation turned dark. Doe alleges that he was offered liquor, which he denied, before he was sexually abused multiple times despite his attempts to leave. At the time, Hale was 25 and Davis was 24. Doe was still legally a minor, but just barely, which would later become a key technicality. Despite some whispers at the gym about preferential treatment, there was no formal complaint or investigation, until 2020. In June of 2020, 4 years after the alleged assault, John Doe sent anonymous emails to two gyms, California All-Stars Ventura and Cheer Extreme All-Stars North Carolina, presumably their Kernersville location. Only the California All-Stars responded, alerting law enforcement in California. This triggered a brief cascade of action. Perhaps Cheer Extreme didn't respond because of how closely Hale was affiliated with the gym, but nonetheless, it seemed as though action was being taken, initiated by the California gym. On June 23rd, USASF case manager Ginger Wilczak contacted the anonymous email requesting his identity. 2 days later, Doe officially reported the case to USASF. By June 28th, USASF's Vice President of Membership, Amy Clark, had been notified. The very next day, law enforcement in Ohio was informed, and Doe cooperated fully with the police on July 2nd. But on July 30th, the case came to a halt. Ohio police declined to press charges. The reasoning? John Doe had been over the age of consent in Ohio, 16 years old, at the time of the alleged assault. What makes this moment so incredibly wrong and disheartening is that it exposes the deep flaws in how our society, and especially youth sports organizations, define and handle abuse. Legally speaking, yes, the age of consent in Ohio is 16. But this wasn't a relationship between two peers. This was a professional adult choreographer, someone with immense influence in the cheer world, allegedly exploiting a minor who looked up to him and relied on him for advancement, approval, and inclusion. That power dynamic alone should have been enough to demand action. While officers did acknowledge that the situation was quote-unquote inappropriate, they were legally powerless to act. This wasn't enough to stop John Doe, though, as he continued to persevere. He pressed USASF to hold Hale and Davis accountable internally. On September 18, 2020, USASF finally launched a third-party investigation. Reminder that this was 3 months after the initial report. A Zoom meeting followed on September 23rd with investigator Kevin McNeil, an authorized representative with USASF. Doe provided names of character witnesses and shared everything he could. Doe went through leaps and bounds just to identify witnesses, name timeframes, and generally get justice. And just for a moment, justice was served, but it didn't last, nor was it enough, even in the moment. During the investigation, Hale and Davis were temporarily suspended from USASF, but on November 19th, Hale and Davis were removed from the suspended list. John Doe was not notified of the decision to reinstate Hale or Davis. Reinstating Brandon Hale and Taji Davis without notifying the survivor, the person who came forward, cooperated with law enforcement, and bravely filed a report, is not just a procedural oversight. It's re-traumatizing betrayal. It showed that his voice only served as the organization's immediate PR, and when that heat dies down, once the attention has shifted to another pressing topic, they can just quietly revert their decision without transparency or regard for John Doe's well-being. What kind of message is this sending to the community? That allegations of abuse can just be erased if they regard a member of the community prominent enough? USASF is not just a governing body, but rather it positions itself as the moral and safety authority in the sport of cheerleading. Removing these individuals from the ineligible list without a public explanation or notice, and no demonstrated accountability from the accused, undermines the very credibility of their safe sport adjacent protocols. No charges, no bans, no transparency, just plain betrayal. Doe eventually came to find out, obviously not by USASF's volition. When Doe emailed Amy Clark asking for an explanation, she redirected him to a council member. There was a call, but the answer he received, a message that the investigation lacked sufficient evidence, primarily due to the absence of eyewitnesses. Here are some important aspects of the phone call. The council member says, "I know that interviews were conducted of you, and Davis, and Hale. Detective Hale. By Detective Hale, he is an independent person. He is not an employee of US All-Star." This is referring to the fact that Taji Davis was a USASF credential member, coach, and choreographer, providing services to USASF member minor athletes throughout the United States on behalf of gyms in Avon Lake, Ohio, and Brecksville, Ohio. This does not include Hale. Hale was an independent person, as said by the council member. He reported to us that he had to conclude that the proof did not establish a violation that occurred. He said that, you testified you were abused, and they denied it. And there were no witnesses to support your claims. So in other words, he told us he couldn't go one way or the other. So this is what we really call a draw. So our hands are tied. It's going to have to be closed. As far as we're concerned, has been closed. Now beyond that, what they did, may call for other disciplinary measures, but I don't think that has been concluded yet. This is where John Doe gets the chance to speak. He says, "So, I just want to be clear. So me having screenshots of messages of them soliciting me to come to their hotel room at 1 a.m, knowing that I'm a minor, as well as having at least 3 other people confirm my story to the investigator, that is not sufficient evidence? Is that what you're saying?" The council member responds, saying, "Well, I'm saying the evidence didn't quite turn out that way. The witnesses didn't witness the event that you're claiming happened." John Doe speaks again. "Right, but they were aware of the event when it was occurring." The council member says, "Well, that's the problem, is that they didn't witness the event." From here, it's a lot of back and forth between John Doe and the council member. The council member continuously arguing that the witnesses didn't witness the actual abuse, so there was no way for them to take action. What's wrong here isn't the decision, it's the reasoning behind it. When John Doe finally learns, on his own, not through outreach from USASF, that his case has been closed, he's met with a cold wall of deflection and redirection. No apology, no transparency, and especially no justice. USASF's logic, as explained by the council member, is that because no one physically witnessed the abuse in the moment that it occurred, their hands were tied. But that completely ignores how abuse and grooming operate. Most sexual abuse doesn't happen in front of witnesses. It happens in private, behind closed doors, with the very intention of avoiding detection. To set an eyewitness as the standard for action is not only unrealistic, it's willfully ignorant. After this, it's quite a bit of silence from Doe and USASF about the matter. Hale and Davis are working with kids, they aren't fighting any legal battles, and everything seems to be swept under the rug. But John Doe wasn't done. John Doe is a fighter. On November 28, 2022, John Doe 1 filed a lawsuit against Hale, Davis, and their company, Showtime Productions, alleging 13 counts of misconduct and abuse. Varsity Brands, USASF, and FloCheer were also named in the complaint, but most of those claims were later dismissed. On August 2, 2023, the court granted Davis's motion to dismiss, but Doe wasn't finished. He filed a motion to alter or amend that decision, and in a twist, the court granted it on January 24, 2024. Taji Davis had responded to the court's requests. Brandon Hale did not, and because of that, the court entered a default judgment against Hale. That means, legally, he lost. Taji Davis fought to prove his innocence while Hale stood in the shadows. I know we skipped ahead a little bit, talking about things that happened in 2023 and 2024, but part of Hale's silence could be largely attributed to something horrific that happened in 2021. Please bear with me as we jump back a bit, because I promise this information is important. In 2021, more disturbing allegations emerged, this time from outside the US. While in Mexico, Hale was accused of violently assaulting his boyfriend, Nico Gallardo, and allegedly pushed him off a third-floor walkway. Gallardo, who is not connected to the cheerleading industry, met Hale at a wedding earlier that year, and the pair went on a date for several months before planning a trip to Tulum, Mexico. They arrived on September 3rd, and according to Gallardo, Hale was drinking heavily before the two went to dinner, where they got into an argument and Gallardo left the restaurant in a cab and fell asleep in a hotel. Hale allegedly returned enraged at around 1 a.m. and began repeatedly punching Gallardo. Gallardo escaped into a wooden walkway outside, but Hale followed and proceeded to push him over the railing. Gallardo said, "It felt like premeditated murder, I swear. He walked in, ready to kill." Know that Hale's boyfriend at the time has since publicly posted photos of his face, beaten and bruised from Hale's abuse. I won't be including them in this video, but know that if you do further research, these photos might come up, so please Google at your own risk. Gallardo received a call from Jonathan Paul, the owner of Island All-Stars in Green Cove Springs, Florida. This was only 2 days after the assault, while he was still in Mexico recovering from his injuries. Paul offered $5,000 if Gallardo agreed to let Hale be released from jail. He agreed, and Hale was released September 8th. However, he was under the impression that the authorities would continue to investigate and did not realize that agreeing to Hale's release would result in the case being closed. He received a total of $5,000 in 3 separate payments from Paul and Michael Scott Wright, a former coach from Paul's gym. All 3 payments say either BH or 4BH, Hale's initials, in the description. According to Monica de Avila, spokeswoman for the Quintana Roo prosecutor's office, the case was closed because the parties reached a financial agreement. This is another example of how power and privilege shield abusers in the cheer world. During all of this, Hale was still under investigation for the previously mentioned alleged instance of sexual misconduct involving a minor cheerleader. Again, USASF declined to rule Brandon Hale as an ineligible cheer coach, saying that the evidence was a draw. Of course, everything seemed to settle down. This was until a Facebook post by cheermad.com, alleging that the Cheer Athletics Austin location brought in Brandon Hale to do choreography for them the week of January 17, 2024. He was reportedly said to be alone with teams, U16 teams or under 16 teams, until 2:30 in the morning. In a statement from an athlete at that location, they said, "I am an athlete on one of the teams Brandon Hale choreographed last night. I did not get home until a redacted time. He used an alias at practice as to not tell us who he was. Obviously, multiple people knew, but I did not until afterwards. He was left alone with a team of minors for an hour, and periodically left alone with us. He was rude and degrading, and in my opinion, seemed as though he could have gotten violent if provoked. After learning I had been talked to, yelled at, and even touched while doing stunts with this man, I feel disgusted. I am sure multiple people on my team did not know about his history and feel the same way I do after learning." Allegedly, Hale was referred to by cheer athletic staff as the choreographer, maybe in a way that would potentially conceal his identity. During the 2024 season, there were also allegations of Hale potentially choreographing for Twist and Shout, helping with Diamond's and Adam and Eve's routines. This situation is wrong because it prioritizes the career and convenience of an accused adult over the safety of young athletes. It is wrong because it shows how easy it is for someone to be removed from a watch list and slide back into the system with zero transparency. It's wrong because it reveals that when cheer programs protect each other, they leave athletes, especially minors, vulnerable, voiceless, and exposed. And it's terrifying because it proves that after everything, even after a formal investigation and national attention, the same people with power and access can come right back because no one really stopped them. And as I close out this video, I want to remind you that Taji Davis and Brandon Hale are not on the USASF ineligible list. This is as of me recording this video on May 10th, 2025. And that was it. As of now, it is unclear if Doe ever heard from USASF again. Hale and Davis were free to continue working with children in cheer gyms across the country. John Doe reported the abuse to USASF, but USASF refused to support them. They had notice, but never permanently suspended Hale, Davis, or Showpro choreography. And that's where things stand, at least for now. Brandon Hale and Taji Davis, despite years of allegations, a court judgment, and documented trauma, are still not on USASF's ineligible list. That silence from the top isn't just an oversight, it's complicity. This story isn't just about 2 men. It's about a system that continually fails to protect the very athletes it claims to uplift. A system that confuses silence for safety. A system that would rather preserve reputations than confront hard truths. What's most disturbing about this case isn't just what happened, it's about how few people are talking about it. Despite the severity of the allegations, the depth of the documentation, and the undeniable courage it took for John Doe to come forward, this scandal remains largely unspoken in the cheer community. In that silence, it's not an accident. This story didn't go viral. It wasn't widely picked up by cheer media. It didn't cause the same outrage we've seen in other sport or scandals. Why? Because Brandon Hale isn't a household name to the average cheer parent. Because there was no perp walk, no dramatic arrest. Because when abusers are smart enough to exploit gray areas of legality, the institutions they operate within feel no pressure to act. But that doesn't make this story any less real or any less dangerous. When we stay silent about stories like this, we make room for them to happen again and again and again. It's not fair to victims, and it's not right to continually allow organizations like USASF to sweep these circumstances under the rug. This case deserves more attention, more outrage, and more reform, because if Brandon Hale can still work with minors in 2025, what does that say about our sport? To the survivors, I see you. To the institutions, we're watching. And to everyone else, silence is not neutrality. Speak up. Thank you for watching. Be loud, be relentless, and be better.